So the beginning of the conversation about Christian anti-Semitism really has to begin with the origins of Christianity itself. So most scholars believe that Jesus lived and died around, in the 30 AD range, dying somewhere between 30. Lots of scholars believe 33 or 35 AD. And so Christianity, once he was raised from the dead and Pentecost Sunday happened, Christianity as a sect of Judaism began. And very early on, Peter has the vision, and Gentiles are considered to be acceptable into this new faith. They can also believe in Messiah. The church leadership meets in Jerusalem at the Jerusalem Council because so many Gentiles are starting to believe that they have to decide what to do with the Mosaic Law, and whether the Mosaic Law will be put on the Gentiles, which they decide that it won't. They make the decision that the Gentile Christians, the Gentiles who believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, will only have to abide by a small set of laws that are take care of the poor, don't steal, etc. So Paul is at that point, in that time frame, he begins to go out. He goes to what is modern day Turkey, he goes to Greece, and there's lots of Gentile converts. And in this time, this would be in between 35, 33 AD and before 70 AD, Nero becomes the emperor of Rome, and historians vary, but he persecutes Christianity, and some say that the Jews had influence, and they influenced the Romans to be harsh on the Christians. And so this animosity began between the Christians and the Jews in a very burgeoning state. And so in 66 AD, the tensions erupt into violence between the Romans and the Jews. They are taking some of the money that should go in the temple. They're being much more repressive on their holdings in the Middle East than they had been before, and so tensions begin to erupt. And Jesus, in Matthew 24, Jesus warns his followers that when you see the city surrounded, you should go into the hills. So a lot of the believers in Messiah went into the hills in advance of the sack of Rome in 70 AD. So after Rome was flattened and everybody was dispersed, not only did Christianity have to redefine itself, but really Judaism had to redefine itself. They no longer had a temple to offer their sacrifices, and that was the core of the Mosaic form of worship. So they had to redefine themselves, and they were dispersed largely to different geographies. So there was no one left in Rome. In Jerusalem. So that begins this separation of ways between the Jews and the Christians. And so the early church fathers, especially the ones from 70 AD, when this happened to the Jewish people, and 200, let's say, they really had to parse through the judgment of Israel, of the Jewish people, in this harsh, overt, completely catastrophic way. And so what you find is that they perceived, the early church fathers, Justin the Martyr was kind of the first one to eloquently describe his belief in why the Jews had been judged, and it was because they rejected Messiah. It was because they had not accepted Jesus as Messiah, but he added to that they were eternally rejected. So he started, the early church fathers started this concept that their rejection was eternal. and that they had missed the Messiah, and therefore they were eternally set aside, and the Christians and the church were the inheritors of the covenant and the inheritors of the promises, and not the Jews. The Jews would not receive the promises that had been given to them. And so in many ways that redefines who God is. It redefines the Old Testament. It makes God into someone who one might say fecklessly moves from one people group to another. And I believe it's the opposite of what the Old Testament paints him to be, which is a faithful God. And though every man fails, he will not lie, he will not lose faith. And that in Jeremiah it says, if you can change the seasons, if you can change the sun and the moon, then maybe you could change this covenant I have with this people group. So they took that and they kind of turned it on its heels. And that was the beginning of the belief sets that started the thought process within Christianity that the Jews were bad.